Welcome to another chapter of Uprooting Rejection. I'm sorry, my name's Anthony Baxter. I do apologize for the delay. Traffic was a little crazy today, but you know what? It's better late than never. Would you not agree? I hope everyone's had a great day today. And pull out your books and let's go to chapter 9, where we'll be talking about forgiveness is key. Forgiveness is key. We're going to look at the last 4 or 5 generations and how things have transpired since the 40s and the 50s. You know, the traditional family dynamics are quickly becoming obsolete. You know, how many of y'all sit together at the table around 6 o'clock with the whole family and eat dinner and conversate and talk? You know what I mean? Talk about how your day was, how school was, and things like this. We don't do these things no more. Now, we may sit at the table, but guess what? We got our iPhones, our iPads, or we're texting and putting things on TikTok in the middle of eating and things like this. You know what I mean? So, with less intimacy within our home, we reside under the same roof, but have no real knowledge of who the people are we live with. Again, because of cell phones, texting, social networks being the main menu of communication these days, how many of y'all sit back and you text your brother or your mother or your father or your kids from upstairs to tell them something and they're downstairs? See, that's the means of communication these days. See, it's easier to hide behind the screen and not share your feelings or your emotions and ambitions. You see, now parents today are working longer hours and past retirement age due to the unstable economy. The economy, I mean, it's like cost of living is going up, wages are staying the same. They're trying to make a break in it to give a little bit more, but that little bit ain't enough. We need more monies. So what do we have to do? We have to work 2 jobs. You know, we have to have a roommate come into the situation just to maintain the rent or the mortgage. You know, so that we can keep things going. Now, this has a way of keeping people oppressed, struggling to survive and not being able to enjoy life in their latter years, as our great grandparents did back in the 40s and 50s. You see, back then it was like, man, retirement age, I'm retiring, I got my pension, da da da, and they could live off that and live a happy, joyful life, do some traveling, you know, hop in the RV and go do some fishing and things like this. But see, these things we can't do. We hit 65, we looking for a second job just to keep things going, you know? So in my book, in the first chapter, I talk about this. In the 40s and 50s, the men brought home the bacon and the wives nurtured the family. They were the nurturers, as the husband was the breadwinner and the disciplinarian. Okay. But as the government began to work on the minds of men and women and started to increase the cost of living, both husband and wife needed to work to make ends meet. And where did that leave the kids? All by themselves. Like I stated, and I think it was the first segment, I remember growing up and waking up in the morning to get ready for school, and mom had my dry cereal on the table and a glass of milk in the refrigerator, you know. And when I come home, I go next door, get the key from the next door neighbor. See, because I would always lose the key, so my mom gave it to the next door neighbor, and unlock the door, get a key back to the next door neighbor, and come on in. And guess who was there? Nobody. You see. But in the 40s and 50s, the mother was there, being that nurturer, making that hot breakfast, and being there for you when you got out of school. So if you had a bad day, you can come and talk to mom. She can hug you and love on you and things like this. But, when we have a bad day, we go and we try to talk to people outside, our friends, people that have no experience or no ability to give us the love and nurturing that we need. This is why we see gangs on the rise and things like this because of the abandonment issue. And it's not that the parent is abandoning the child, it's just the cost of living and inflation has taken it to a point to where in order to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table and clothes on their back, we got to make the money. We got to make the money. So I'm not saying that all parents are abandoning their kids, because many of us love our kids, wants to do the right thing for our kids and this, that, and the third. But we got to make the money to keep things moving in the house, to keep things moving in the house. So um, so as we see, the government, they came and started talking about women's lib and women's rights. And I'm not going to say women should not work, and I'm not going to say all that, but the word says that, they are nurturers. They nurture, you know what I mean? Even the husband, they nurture. They make sure that he's eating right, the right type of foods, making sure clothes are clean and things like this. Nurturing. Okay. So in my book, I wrote this pertaining to this. I wrote, as stated in uh, the book's first chapter, abandonment started to pick up momentum when the economy called for both parents to be breadwinners. Children were left alone, and rejection began to infiltrating America's homes like never before. Children were not nurtured as their parents were. They didn't receive the quality time needed for bonding. In some cases, attention wasn't shown because of the demand from the job and the need for income to support the growing family in the 60s. So, again, it's not that the parent's fault. The parent is just trying to keep up with uh, the times, the inflation. And me myself, I believe that it's a trick of the enemy to tear apart the family structure to get it where it's at today. And we see where it's at today. All we hear on the news is gun violence and robbing and killing and things of this nature. And most of it is done by the up and coming generation. Why? Because again, that momentum over the years have picked up from one generation to the next generation. So there's a little bit more anger, a little bit more frustration from the abandonment and not getting the love and support. And I'm not going to say that we as parents, we don't aren't giving the love, but you have to realize children need a certain uh, they need quality time, just like we need quality time with our mates. Okay. And when they don't get that quality time, what they see as quality time, they feel abandoned. And then that spirit of rejection begins to set in. So as those children grow up without a nurturer in the home, there were many things they did not receive that their parents did growing up. Now, see, our parents or our grandparents cannot understand us because they grew up in a different era with different uh, 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 with a different backdrop. I'll put it like that, a different backdrop. You know what I mean? So as they grew up, had children, and things begin to fall apart, and your parents grow up and they have you, things just continue to go further and further downhill. So many believe that if I provide a roof over my child's head, food, and the latest trends of clothes for the kids and the games and stuff, that's good parenting, making sure that the kids have food, clothing, and shelter, and have toys to play with and things like this. But we must realize that that is not parenting. That's a part of parenting. So I wrote this pertaining to uh, this subject in my book. I wrote many of those abandoned children begin parenting without full knowledge and preparation for raising a child. Oh, I'm sorry, that was wrong. That was the wrong part. That was the wrong part. You know what? I need to go. I need to step back a little bit because uh, talking about the different generations and the behaviors our parents had to deal with that was not a part of our own generation. Um, that's what this segment here is talking about in the book, where the children begin parenting without full knowledge and preparation of raising a child. Okay. See, most did the best they could with what they saw in their homes, and some simply couldn't cope with the responsibility of being parents because of the abandonment issues and what was going on in their home as they had children. And see, a lot of folks, during the baby boomer stage and so forth, they forgot about the commandment that God said not to have sexual intercourse until marriage. It was just one of those free for alls back there in the 60s. And that moved on to the 70s and 80s and 90s. And we can see where it's at today. Now, dealing with many believing about having a roof over their head and food and all this type of stuff, I wrote this: parenting is more than supplying a roof over a child's head, putting food on the table, and clothes on their back. There are emotional and spiritual needs each child must have in order to feel secure, loved, and have a sense of belonging. That all of that stuff does not come from material. It doesn't come from the roof over their head. It doesn't come from the food that they eat, nor does it come from the clothing that they wear. It comes from the time that is spent with that child. So that child is able to learn how to mature emotionally and have an understanding of spiritual things, of spiritual things. Regardless of age and status, everyone desires love from their parents. The sad truth is some parents are just not capable of giving or receiving love. When you come from a home where love wasn't shown to you, it can be hard to give love to someone else. Do you believe that? They say what is in you comes out of you. So if you grew up in a home where love was not, you weren't getting the love you felt due, or uh, I know in some cases, talking to folks, they're like, my mom or my dad, they didn't really say I love you too much, things like this. So as that type of individual grows up, they're going to grow up not really knowing, one, how to receive love. And if they don't have it in them, they're not going to be able to give love. You see what I'm saying? Now, we're created and made from love. Yahweh is love. But see, what the enemy has done is he's crept in and brought these traumas in to distort and to dewire your makeup so that you're running around uh, with this rejection and anger within you. God didn't give us that. Okay? God did not give us that. Now, I will have to say this: parenting is not for everyone. Parenting is not for everyone. It should be. But as we go through life and we come from different backgrounds and from different households, and depending upon what our parents went through and been through growing up, that DNA, that thing is on us too. So in some cases, parenting may not be your bad. But we do want to disobey Yahweh and have sex before marriage. And what happens? You have a child. You have a child. And see, a lot of people having kids and then they abort the kids. Then there's people that have the kids and they decide to keep the kids. Okay. Today, many have children with no clue on what it takes to parent a child. We know that we need to make money. We know we need a place to stay. We know that they need food, and we know that they need clothes. But what about the emotional, and what about the spiritual? What do we know about that? Because that is going to allow that child to grow and mature more healthily than the clothes and the shelter that is provided. Now, some like me may have said, I'm going to have kids and show my parents how to love. You know, when you're not getting the love that you feel you deserve, or you see other kids' parents getting, and you like, man, I want my parents to love me like that. And you're like, when I have my kids, I'm gonna love them like that, and I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna show them. But you can only do what you have seen and model after that. Because for me, I did worse than what my parents did. You know what I mean? So I thank God today for uprooting a lot of the roots that were planted uh, in me. Um, so we have to move out of these types of mindsets and behaviors. We must forgive those that hurt us, our mothers, our fathers, other family members, and others throughout our life. We must learn to forgive them, even though what they may have done may have been totally wrong. A lot of men as well as women were molested as kids. That's totally wrong. You had no play in it whatsoever. But the thing of it is that thing there is affecting you and has been affecting you for the majority of your life, from the time it took place up until now as we speak. So the only way for you to become free to live your best life is to forgive. To forgive. In my book, I wrote this. When we forgive those who have abandoned, abused, and hurt us, we permit God to heal every pain and open the door to receive His love. When we refuse to forgive, however, we become imprisoned by our own bitterness. It is said that what doesn't kill you will only make you stronger. In my life, I have found that through painful times, I grew and matured in many areas. I couldn't see it while going through it, but looking back, I can say that the pain I endured strengthened me. Many find it hard to let go of the things that happened to them as children. Don't let unforgiveness from the past destroy your future. And there's many of us that have allowed the past, the things that had gone on in the past, the unforgiveness of people, places, and things in the past to affect our future. How is that? I'm glad you asked. You see, what happens a lot of times is through that unforgiveness, we get bitterness, resentment, anger, uh, uh, all kind of negative emotions, which brings upon negative behaviors. And through those negative behaviors being brought out into the world, it brought back negative consequences. You see, so that negativity and that unforgiveness can destroy the future that you have been promised. Because remember, God said in uh, Jeremiah 29, I think it's verse 11, He said, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. You hear that? Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. So this tells us that this ain't got nothing to do with God. God ain't trying to harm you. And the purpose that He has for you ain't for you being broke, busted, and disgusted, and depressed and oppressed. That's not what He has for you. He says He has plans to give you hope and a future. He never planned for you to go through the traumas you had to endure. That was not His plan. That was Satan's plan, to distract you and to keep you from your purpose and your future Yahweh has for you and still has for you. but we must forgive and move forward. Now, if we could do it ourselves, many of us would have done this a long time ago. Wouldn't you agree? We need Yahweh's help. We need his help. I wrote this in my book pertaining to this subject. Without God's healing your wounds, you may end up being the very person you didn't want to become. God has commanded his people to walk in love, forgive as we have been forgiven, and live peacefully with others on earth. True forgiveness can only come when we surrender it all to God. Just give it to God. Forgiveness doesn't come to us naturally. It's not a natural thing, okay? But when we are in Christ, we are new creatures. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. That's 2 Corinthians 5:17. We also know forgiveness and healing takes time. So we must rely on God continually. Being human, we miss the mark often, but we must stay committed to living our lives like the one who has adopted us. Like the one who has adopted us. So let me tell you, see, when you're dealing with unforgiveness, you're so angry and bitter inside, you ain't thinking about God. You're not thinking about, I remember, growing up and driving in my teenage years, and I would pull up to a stoplight and I'd look over and somebody have a smile on their face. And I'd be, what is there to be smiling about? I couldn't understand how a person can just have a smile on their face at a stoplight. Didn't make no sense to me. I was always had a mean mugging look because I had a lot of anger and stuff within me. You know what I mean? So we must learn to forgive. We must learn to forgive because it's through the forgiveness that we become free and we're able to live that life that God has waiting for us to live. Remember, we all have a purpose, okay? So let's begin to live our purpose and begin to forgive. Hey, I'm gonna share a little bit about me and the anger I had within me that led to me being someone I never wanted to be. Listen to this. For some time, I had deep-seated anger for my stepfather. In hindsight, I can see that the more I said to myself that I would never be like him, the more I was becoming like him. A matter of fact, worse than him. How many of y'all said that about your parents, your mom, for you women talking, I ain't gonna be like my mama, or you fellas be like, hey man, I ain't gonna be like my dad. But the more you said it, the more you seem to become of him or her. All right. As the unforgiveness set in, it opened the door for rejection, anger, and rage. These were the same things in my father that led him to be the way he was. And those same things manifested in me in an even greater way. Each generation, it gets worse. Okay. This is a generational curse. All right. Each generation seems to get worse until someone in the lineage decides to break free. Eventually, I broke the generational curse that plagued my family and me, leading to the healing of my heart, mind, and emotions. I could not begin to truly heal until I truly forgave. It's one thing to say, yeah, man, I forget, I forgive, man. Hey, man, I forgot all about that. That's way back then. But, when you really do some soul searching, you'll find out that I really haven't forgiven. I've forgotten, but the behavior from the trauma, from that thing, I'm carrying with me. So I must truly forgive and let God come in and heal me, restore me, and renew me so that I can live out the purpose and live a free life, not a bound life to your emotions and your pain and your pain. I want to share this with y'all. I want to share this with you. If you want to live in true peace, you must invite the Prince of Peace and the love of God into your life to restore you. You cannot restore yourself. Okay. You cannot restore yourself. You can make some moves, but the true peace and the true love that you need comes from above. This is where it starts. This is where it starts. Listen, you are one of a kind. And the more you talk about yourself in terms of in the Father's words, the more you'll believe it. All those old thoughts and words from the enemy will start to fade, will start to fade. You know, I want, I used to say this to folks. Take, take 2 or 3 hours and just listen to the self-talk that you have with yourself about yourself. We put ourselves down. We talk so dirty about ourselves, you know, that talk is being birthed in the atmosphere. We're cursing our own selves by the self-talk we have with ourselves about ourselves. So we got to shift that. Oh, I'm just fat. See, I knew, see, they was right. I couldn't do it. I could never, all that negative stuff. All that negativity breeds negativity. We need to start speaking positive things over ourselves and to ourselves to allow positivity to come down and hit the earth on our behalf. On our behalf. Listen to this. As you replace them with new positive ones from God, people often wonder why they are here on earth and what their purpose is. Knowing your identity in Christ will close the door to those questions. As the Spirit of the Lord reminds you of your true identity that is in Him, you must embrace it. God is your Father. So, what we're talking about here is getting back to your true identity, because from day one, the enemy has been after you. And all those traumas and things that had happened was basically to derail you from your purpose so that you never reach your purpose. But God has a purpose for you. And He wants to uproot the spirit of rejection through the abandonment and traumas that you went through in your life, so that you can begin to live out the identity that He gave to you. Remember, we were talking about Jeremiah 29:11. He said, "For I know the plan I have for you, declares the Lord, plan to prosper you and not to harm you." God wants to prosper you, okay? But He cannot prosper you full of anger and full of rage. You got to let it go. You got to let it go, okay? So begin to forgive. Begin to forgive. All right. Now, as we say, after each chapter, we got questions. We got questions. So again, y'all, go get the book. Read the chapter. If you don't have the book, go get the book. Go to Amazon, type in Uprooting Rejection, and then put Anthony Baxter, and the book will come up. Look just like this. You see them roots coming up? That could be you coming up out the ground. All right. So let's get to the questions. All right. Number one. Healing from past hurts and traumas begin with blank and blank. So if you got the book, read the chapter, you can answer that question. When we refuse to forgive, we become blank. All right. Jesus suffered rejection from His family and His creation, but through it all, He blank each one and blank. Got to get the book to read it. All right. Number 4. When we forgive those who have abandoned, abused, and hurt us, we blank. Number 5, we begin to think about ourselves differently as God's words concerning us renews our minds. Is that true or is that false? There are emotional and spiritual needs each child must have in order to feel blank, loved, and have a sense of blank. All right. Now, I went over that in this episode, so y'all should know that if you're paying attention. All right. Number 7, if you want to live a life of total peace and true love, you must invite the Prince of Peace and the love of God into your life to blank. To blank. All right. So again, y'all, we're talking about forgiveness is the key. If you're dealing with abandonment issues and that spirit of rejection has you bound, do some soul searching. Write down those individuals that have harmed you and hurt you and brought these traumas upon you, and talk to the Lord and forgive them. Maybe write them a letter and tell them, I forgive you. Whatever you need to do. You know, everybody's different, you know, whatever you need, but you must let it go, get it out of you so God can come in and fill you and you can live in peace, love, and tranquility. Peace, love, and tranquility. All right, y'all. So next week, the topic is going to be freedom, a new way of living. Because see, once you forgive, you truly forgive and let God in, you free. And you have the ability of living a totally different way. All right. See, when you got peace, love, joy in you, you know, you're not bogged down with anger and rage and all that stuff, man. You start, man. Things open up for you. Things open up for you. Believe me. Believe me. I know. Believe me. I know. So, hey, y'all, come check us out next week, 6 o'clock on Tuesday. Until then, y'all have a peaceful week and know that God loves you, and so do I. Have a great day.